Welcome to our Neuroscience Masterclass. Today, we're exploring one of the absolute most profound mysteries of human existence in this explainer. I want you to imagine, just for a second, a pretty bold thesis. Your brain is completely sealed inside a dark, silent box, your skull, right? There is literally no light and absolutely no sound in there. It's really just this massive collection of billions of cells living in a dark pond. And what that means is that your entire reality, literally everything you're experiencing right this very second, is a fabricated simulation created entirely from electrochemical signals.
So I actually have to ask you a quick question to kick off our class today. Look around you. Take a second. Is what you see, hear, and feel actually real? You might naturally think that the reality outside is exactly what you're perceiving. But the resounding answer for modern neuroscience is a definitive no. Almost at the very first millisecond your senses encounter the world, your brain is already transforming and editing reality. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our syllabus for today's session. We'll start with the basics of Neuroscience 101, then explore the illusions of perception, construct color and pain in our lab demonstrations, define human consciousness, look at clinical applications, and wrap the whole thing up with our storytelling brains.
All right, moving right along. Section 1. Welcome to Neuroscience 101, the brain in a dark box. So the core biological reality here is that your brain lives in absolute, complete darkness. All brains, by the way, from tiny fish all the way up to enormous elephants, rely entirely on microscopic neurons to translate outside input. We're talking light, heat, pressure. It translates all of that into an electrochemical language. But here's the crazy part. It doesn't process everything. In fact, we literally throw away 99.9% of the sensory information from the world around us. So at any given moment, your neurons are heavily editing reality, making you effectively blind to 99.9% of objective reality. And why? Just to help you efficiently survive.
Which brings us to Section 2, the illusion of perception, how the brain edits reality. If we're throwing out so much data, you're probably wondering, why does our vision feel so smooth and continuous moment to moment? Well, it's actually a massive, stitched-together interpretation. To prove this, let's do a really quick demonstration. If you hold out your thumb at arm's length and just look at your thumbnail, that tiny area, which is about a 1-degree angle of your visual field, is the absolute only place you can actually see with 20/20 vision. Everywhere else in your visual field, you are legally blind. You really only see detail in about 1% of your entire visual field. So how do you see the whole room? Well, your eyes dart around about 3 times per second, sampling tiny little pieces of high-quality visual real estate, and your brain just kind of guesses and fills in the rest of the blurry surroundings based on its models of how the world is supposed to work. This leads us to a brilliant quote from neuroscientist Anil Seth. He says, "Illusions are fascinating. They're like fractures in the matrix." As neuroscientists, illusions aren't just, fun party tricks. They are absolutely vital scientific tools. They expose the discrepancy between objective reality and our subjective perception. They essentially help us find the cracks in the mortar of the world we've built for ourselves, revealing what our brain is actually doing behind the scenes all the time. All right, Section 3, constructing color and pain. Time for our lab demonstrations.
We're going to prove that everyday experiences are purely mental interpretations. And we're starting with the internet-famous dress debate. You remember this, right? Why did some people see it as white and gold and others as blue and black? The pixels hitting everyone's eyes were totally identical. The difference was entirely in the brain's assumptions. If your brain assumes the dress is lit by artificial indoor yellow light, it essentially subtracts the yellow, and boom, you see blue and black. But if your brain assumes it's in a shadow under natural blue or daylight, it subtracts the blue, and you see white and gold. The absolutely crucial point here is that color isn't a physical property of the world. It's just an interpretation by your brain to hold your environment constant, no matter the lighting. Now, what's really interesting is that this exact same editing process happens with audio. Remember the Yanny versus Laurel debate? It's the same kind of degraded, ambiguous audio file. The file actually contains both high and low frequencies. People whose brains naturally pay more attention to the high frequencies jump to the word Yanny, while those focusing on the lower frequencies hear Laurel. Whenever your brain encounters uncertainty, it actively fills in the audio gaps based on those ambiguous frequencies to give you a definitive, though obviously not always objective, experience. Let's wrap up our lab demonstrations with the thermal grill illusion. Imagine you touch alternating warm and cold metal bars simultaneously. You don't actually feel warm and cold. Instead,
you feel this really intense, burning pain sensation. No way, right? Why does that happen? Well, your brain gets completely confused by the conflicting signals. The heat signals essentially cancel out the cold ones, which leaves only your pain sensors activated. So even pain is an illusionary construct of the brain. It's a completely necessary alarm system meant to aid your survival, teaching you what's safe and what's dangerous, rather than acting as some objective measurement of reality.
Let's move on to Section 4, Defining Human Consciousness, the holy grail of neuroscience. Having essentially proven that perception is an illusion, we have to face the ultimate mystery. How exactly does matter become thought? For centuries, early philosophers, like Descartes, defined consciousness through dualism, basically believing the mind and the physical brain were completely separate entities. But modern neuroscience defines it quite differently. Consciousness isn't some separate spirit floating around. It is the internal awareness created when the physical brain stitches together all those sensory inputs. It's the internal amplifier that makes it feel like something to see the color red or taste a strawberry or hear a clap of thunder. It's the grand simulation of the world that your brain is constantly, continuously running. And brilliantly, we actually know that this conscious awareness is a completely separate mechanism from basic perception, and that's thanks to a phenomenon called blindsight. Scientists have studied stroke patients who have damage to their visual cortex, which creates a total blind spot. Yet if you put an object, like a wrench or scissors, in their blind spot and force them to just guess what it is, they consistently guess right. Information is absolutely getting in, their brain is perceiving it, but they have zero conscious awareness of actually seeing it. It's wild. Perception and consciousness are processed entirely separately. Let's move to and see how this builds our understanding of what consciousness is actually for. Think about a baby's brain. It has roughly 2 quadrillion synapses. It's kind of like a network of really inefficient country roads. They take in absolutely everything, like a massive floodlight of consciousness. But as we age into adulthood, we prune those synapses. We get rid of what we don't need, building these really lean, super efficient neural superhighways. So our consciousness becomes more like a spotlight, illuminating only what is absolutely critical for us to focus on at any given moment. Basically, consciousness acts like an editing spotlight that prunes away excess noise. Moving along to Section 5, Measuring the Unseen Mind, Clinical Applications. So if consciousness is a completely internal experience, how in the world can we scientifically measure it in patients who can't physically communicate? Well, Dr. Brian Edlow and his clinical team are doing exactly this. They use a technique where they basically ping the brain with a magnetic pulse called TMS, and then they look for an electrical echo. Think of it like throwing a pebble into a lake. The pebble is that pulse. If the electrical ripples die out quickly, the patient is unconscious. But if they use an EEG to measure the brain waves and they see that the echo rings out across the brain into this highly complex, coordinated symphony of electrical signals, that patient is likely conscious, even if their physical body is entirely unresponsive. And using this exact technique, scientists have uncovered a truly astonishing statistic. Up to 20% of coma patients who appear completely unresponsive, people who don't open their eyes or move their limbs, are actually trapped but fully conscious inside their edited reality. Their brains are sparking with the complex signatures of conscious awareness. And obviously, identifying this can fundamentally change life-sustaining decisions for their families. It's a total game changer. Let's look at Section 6, the storytelling brain, memory, and the self. So what about our past? Well, it turns out our memories and even our very sense of self are really just stories our brains tell us. And this is thanks to a biological mechanism called reconsolidation. Now, you might be thinking a memory is like a video file you just retrieve from a hard drive, right? But in reality, every single time you recall a memory, it returns to a completely unstable state. To put it back into long-term storage, your neurons literally have to rebuild the connections from scratch. You effectively destroy the original version and rebuild it with added noise. So you're constantly living a revision of the story of your life, which pretty much proves our history is really just an active, constantly changing prediction. And this leads us to a profoundly beautiful reflection from neuroscientist Susana Martinez Conde. She says, "Your sense of who you are is an illusion as everything else. You're no exception. We are just these gorgeous biological storytelling machines, completely designed by evolution to make predictions so we can survive. And, recognizing that our very identities are just stitched together narratives, it doesn't diminish us. It actually makes us beautifully humble."
Which leaves us with one final thought for you to ponder long after this class is over. If our memories dynamically change every single time we recall them, and our daily perception of the world is just a curated, edited illusion completely designed for survival rather than accuracy, who are we really? Trust the illusion, my friends, because it is the incredible, truly miraculous reality your brain has built just for you. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what you see.